The journey begins. Maya Daniels leaned back in her seat, letting the hum of the plane's engines soothe her frayed nerves. First class wasn't just a luxury for her. It was a hard-earned reward, a small indulgence after years of grinding in a world that rarely gave second chances. She sipped the sparkling water placed on the fold-out tray, her eyes skimming over the bustling activity on the tarmac through the oval window. The setting sun cast golden streaks across the horizon, painting the scene with serenity. This was supposed to be the beginning of something monumental. Her company, a tech startup specializing in advanced artificial intelligence systems, had recently caught the attention of an international conglomerate. The meeting tomorrow in Zurich could solidify a partnership that would launch her business to unprecedented heights. Maya smiled faintly, the thought of it offering a brief reprieve from the exhaustion etched into her bones. She had risen against the odds, not just climbing the ladder but building it from scratch. Born and raised in a neighborhood where ambition was often stifled by circumstance, Maya had refused to let the world dictate her potential. Her parents, both factory workers, had instilled in her the value of perseverance. They had sacrificed everything to send her to college, and she had vowed to make their sacrifices worth it. The memory of those early days still lingered. Nights spent working multiple jobs to cover tuition, juggling coursework with internships that barely paid. Maya had fought for every inch of her success, proving time and again that she belonged in spaces that weren't designed for someone like her. Now, as the founder and CEO of a thriving company, she sat in this first-class seat as a symbol of that journey, a reminder to herself that she had earned every bit of it. The flight attendant, a young man with an easy smile and sharp uniform, approached with a tray of pre-flight drinks. "Champagne, ma'am?" he asked. Maya shook her head, opting to stick with water. "Thank you," she said, her voice calm but warm. She returned her focus to the leather-bound notebook resting on her lap. Its pages were filled with strategies, notes, and ideas, meticulously jotted down in her precise handwriting. This was her ritual, refining her pitch, ensuring every detail was perfect. She was ready. But perfection, as she would soon learn, could be fleeting. The first glimpse of trouble, the faint commotion at the front of the first-class cabin drew her attention. Maya looked up just as a strikingly dressed woman entered the cabin. The woman, tall with blonde hair styled in soft waves, exuded confidence, or was it entitlement? Her expensive handbag dangled from her elbow, her every step calculated, as though the plane itself was her stage. Behind her, a shorter companion followed hesitantly, casting nervous glances around the cabin. "Unbelievable," the blonde muttered, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "This seat assignment is absurd." Maya felt a prickle of unease but dismissed it. Passengers often grumbled about seating. She returned her attention to her notebook, scribbling down a few last-minute ideas, until the blonde woman's voice rose again. "I'm supposed to be in 1A. It's my seat." The woman snapped, her tone sharp enough to cut through the hum of the cabin. Maya tensed. 1A. That was her seat. Her ticket, booked weeks in advance, confirmed it. Yet the blonde woman had stopped right beside her, her perfectly manicured fingers tapping impatiently against the armrest. "Excuse me," the woman said, her voice dripping with condescension. "There's been a mistake. You're in my seat." Maya looked up, meeting the woman's icy gaze. "There's no mistake," Maya replied evenly. "This is my seat. 1A. The blonde woman, whose name Maya would later learn, was Evelyn Stokes, arched an impeccably shaped eyebrow. "I think you misunderstood. I'm a Platinum Elite member. This seat is always reserved for me. You'd be more comfortable elsewhere, I'm sure." Maya felt her pulse quicken but remained composed. "I'm perfectly comfortable here," she said, her tone calm yet resolute. Evelyn's companion tugged at her sleeve, whispering something Maya couldn't hear. Evelyn ignored her, leaning closer instead. "Look," she said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "I understand these things happen. Maybe you bought an upgrade last minute. That's fine. But this seat belongs to me. It always has." Maya inhaled deeply, her resolve firm. "I didn't upgrade. I purchased this ticket weeks ago, and I have no intention of moving." The tension thickened. The other passengers in first class began casting discreet glances toward the scene, their curiosity palpable. Maya could feel the weight of their stares, the silent judgment that often followed her into spaces like these. It wasn't just about the seat. It never was. The flight attendant intervenes. The young flight attendant, clearly sensing the growing tension, approached with a cautious smile. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, glancing between Maya and Evelyn. "Yes," Evelyn said sharply, her voice taking on a performative edge. "There's been a mix-up. This seat belongs to me, but somehow it's been assigned to her." Maya handed over her boarding pass without hesitation, the calm in her movements a stark contrast to Evelyn's barely contained outrage. The flight attendant examined the ticket and nodded. "This is indeed Miss Daniels' seat," he said, turning to Evelyn. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but you'll need to take your assigned seat." Evelyn's polished veneer cracked. Her smile vanished, replaced by a simmering glare. "There's no way this is correct. I always sit in 1A. This must be some kind of mistake." The flight attendant hesitated, caught between Evelyn's assertiveness and Maya's quiet confidence. "I'll double-check with the supervisor," he said, retreating down the aisle. Maya leaned back in her seat, her expression neutral, but inside frustration bubbled. This wasn't the first time she'd been challenged like this. Her right to exist in spaces of privilege questioned simply because of how she looked. But she refused to let Evelyn, or anyone, diminish her. Evelyn crossed her arms, her lips pressed into a thin line. "You could make this easier, you know," she said, her voice low but no less cutting. "Move to another seat. It's not like you belong here anyway." Maya's gaze snapped to Evelyn's, her calm exterior giving way to a steely resolve. "I belong wherever I choose to be," she said firmly, "and I'm not moving." The tension was palpable, the silence deafening. Evelyn's companion tugged at her sleeve again, murmuring, "Evelyn, just let it go." But Evelyn wasn't about to let anything go. The conflict escalates. The flight attendant returned, now accompanied by the cabin supervisor, a middle-aged woman with a crisp uniform and an air of practiced authority. Her name tag read Lillian, and her neutral expression betrayed no hint of bias as she approached the unfolding drama. "What seems to be the issue?" Lillian asked, her tone calm but commanding, as though she'd diffused 100 similar situations before. Evelyn jumped at the opportunity to speak first. "There's been a mix-up," she said, her voice now smoother, laced with false charm. "I'm supposed to be in seat 1A. It's always reserved for me. I'm a Platinum Elite member. I fly with this airline exclusively, and I expect my loyalty to be recognized." Maya leaned back slightly, observing the scene unfold with quiet composure. She decided to let Evelyn vent her entitlement before responding. It was always better to show restraint until the right moment. Lillian nodded curtly and turned her attention to Maya. "Miss, may I see your boarding pass, please?" Without hesitation, Maya handed it over, her face calm but her eyes sharp. She knew how these situations worked. The weight of assumptions, her skin, her gender, her presence in a space some didn't think she deserved, could tip the scales against her in an instant. But she also knew the power of preparation. Maya had always been meticulous, ready to meet challenges head-on. Lillian examined the boarding pass, then glanced at Evelyn. "Miss Daniels' ticket is valid for seat 1A, she said, her tone firm. "There is no mistake here." Evelyn's jaw tightened, her polished exterior beginning to crack. "This is ridiculous," she hissed. "I spent more on this airline than most people earn in a year. Surely you can find her another seat. I don't care if it's still in first class. Just move her." Maya's calm facade remained intact, but the implication stung. Move her? The words were heavy with unspoken meaning. Maya met Evelyn's glare evenly. "I'm not moving," she said, her voice steady, the edge of steel unmistakable. "I paid for this seat, and I intend to keep it." The cabin begins to take notice. The passengers around them, who had been pretending to mind their own business, were now openly watching the scene. The soft rustling of newspapers and idle scrolling on tablets had ceased, replaced by side glances and whispers. Some looked uncomfortable. Others seemed curious, even entertained, by the growing tension. Evelyn noticed the attention and seemed to thrive on it, her voice rising as she addressed Lillian again. "This isn't just about a seat," she declared dramatically. "It's about principle. I've been loyal to this airline for years. I shouldn't be treated like this." She gestured vaguely toward Maya, the unspoken words hanging in the air. Maya's lips pressed into a thin line, her patience wearing thin. "Like what exactly?" she asked, her tone calm but pointed. "Say what you mean." Evelyn faltered, her confidence wavering for the briefest moment. "You know what I mean," she muttered, looking away. "I don't," Maya replied, leaning forward slightly. "Why don't you spell it out for everyone here?" The challenge hung in the air, heavy with tension. Evelyn's face flushed, and her companion, still awkwardly standing nearby, tugged on her arm. "Evelyn, please," she whispered. "Let's just go to our seats." But Evelyn wasn't ready to concede. Not yet. Her pride wouldn't let her back down in front of an audience. The supervisor's dilemma. Lillian's professional mask began to slip, the tension clearly affecting her. She turned back to Maya, her voice careful. "Miss Daniels, I understand your frustration, but perhaps we could resolve this quickly if you'd be willing to move to another seat. It's still in first class, and—" "No," Maya interrupted, her voice firm, but not loud. She wasn't going to let them frame this as a compromise. She knew what it was, an expectation for her to yield, to make herself smaller, for the comfort of someone else. "This is my seat. I paid for it. I will not be moving." Lillian hesitated, clearly unprepared for Maya's unyielding stance. She looked at Evelyn, then back at Maya, weighing her options. This wasn't a simple customer service issue anymore. It was a potential PR nightmare. And the tension in the cabin was thick enough to cut with a knife. Evelyn, sensing Lillian's hesitation, pressed her advantage. "You see," she said, gesturing dramatically toward Maya. "She's being difficult for no reason. I'm willing to compromise, but she's making this impossible." Maya couldn't help but let out a soft, incredulous laugh. "You're willing to compromise by taking the seat you were assigned. How generous of you." Evelyn's face turned an even deeper shade of red, her indignation boiling over. "I don't know who you think you are," she snapped. "But people like you don't belong in first class. You're just. That's enough." Lillian's voice cut through the cabin like a whip. The passengers gasped, and Evelyn froze, shocked into silence. Lillian's face was flushed, her professionalism cracking under the pressure. "Mrs. Stokes, I must insist you take your assigned seat immediately." A call for accountability. Evelyn opened her mouth to argue but was interrupted by the soft chime of a phone notification. Maya, unbothered by the escalating scene, reached into her blazer pocket and pulled out her phone. She glanced at the screen and smiled faintly. She looked back at Lillian and said, "Excuse me for a moment." Then, with deliberate calm, she tapped a number on the screen and held the phone to her ear. "Marcus," she said, her voice low but firm. "Yes, it's Maya Daniels. I'm currently on flight 827, and I'm having an issue with the staff. No, it's not a simple misunderstanding. It's about how I'm being treated because someone thinks they're entitled to my seat." The cabin fell silent, every passenger now fully engrossed in the unfolding drama. Evelyn's smug expression faltered as she watched Maya speak with quiet authority. Lillian and the flight attendant exchanged uneasy glances, clearly realizing this was no ordinary passenger. "Yes," Maya continued. "I need this handled immediately. And Marcus, make sure this doesn't stop with me. I want a full review of their training procedures and how they handle situations like this. This can't keep happening, not to me, and not to anyone else." She ended the call and slipped the phone back into her pocket, her composure unshaken. Turning to Lillian, she said, "You might want to let the captain know that corporate will be contacting him shortly." Lillian's face turned pale, the weight of Maya's words sinking in. This wasn't just a disgruntled passenger. This was someone with influence, someone who wouldn't let the matter rest. The captain intervenes. Minutes later, the cabin door opened, and the captain himself appeared. His uniform was immaculate, his demeanor calm but commanding. He glanced at Maya, then at Evelyn, and finally at Lillian, who stood awkwardly at his side. "Ladies," he said, his voice steady, "I've been informed of the situation. Let me be clear, this flight will not be delayed further. Mrs. Stokes, you will take your assigned seat, or you will be removed from this flight." Evelyn's mouth fell open, her indignation momentarily silenced. "You're removing me? For what? I'm the victim here." The captain's expression didn't waver. "You've disrupted the flight and created an uncomfortable environment for the other passengers. This behavior is unacceptable. My decision is final." Evelyn looked around the cabin, searching for support, but found none. Even her companion avoided her gaze, clearly mortified. Realizing she was out of options, Evelyn let out an angry huff and stormed toward her assigned seat. The captain nodded at Maya, his eyes briefly showing something akin to respect, before returning to the cockpit. The tension in the cabin began to dissipate, though the murmurs of passengers continued. Maya picked up her notebook and resumed her work as if nothing had happened. She had won the battle, but she knew the larger war, the fight against entitlement, prejudice, and the quiet injustices of the world, was far from over. The fallout. The cabin was finally quiet again, save for the hum of the engines and the occasional rustling of newspapers and tablets. But the stillness was deceptive. Beneath it lay an undercurrent of tension and curiosity, rippling through the passengers like static electricity. Maya could feel their eyes on her, some discreet and others bold, as though they were trying to unravel the mystery of who she was and why she commanded such authority. Evelyn sat stiffly in her assigned seat, 2 rows behind Maya, her jaw clenched and her perfectly manicured nails tapping an angry rhythm on the armrest. Her companion, Linda, avoided eye contact, pretending to be engrossed in the safety instructions printed on the laminated card in her lap. The air around Evelyn seemed to vibrate with barely contained fury. Maya, on the other hand, exuded calm. She had already resumed flipping through her leather-bound notebook, the pen in her hand moving swiftly across the page. Her outward serenity masked the flicker of annoyance still simmering within her. This wasn't the first time she had faced someone like Evelyn, someone who believed their status or privilege gave them the right to dictate the rules. Maya had learned long ago how to deal with such encounters, not with anger or confrontation, but with quiet, unwavering resolve. The deliberate response. The flight attendant, Greg, returned to the first-class cabin, his earlier confidence replaced by a tentative wariness. He hesitated near Evelyn's row before deciding against speaking to her. Instead, he approached Lillian, who stood near the galley with her arms crossed and a strained expression on her face. "What do we do now?" Greg whispered, his eyes darting toward Evelyn, then back to Lillian. Lillian shook her head. "We keep things running smoothly. The captain's already involved, and corporate's watching. One more slip-up, and it won't just be her getting removed from the plane." Greg swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Do you think she really knows someone at the board?" Lillian gave him a withering look. "Did you see the way she handled herself? People like that don't bluff, Greg. They don't have to." Greg nodded reluctantly, then straightened his tie and forced a professional smile back onto his face. "Right. Let's just keep everything calm until we're in the air." Evelyn's breaking point. For Evelyn, the humiliation was unbearable. She had spent her life cultivating an image of control, power, and privilege. Everything she did, from the way she dressed to the way she spoke, was designed to remind the world of her superiority. And yet, in front of a cabin full of strangers, she had been put in her place by someone she deemed beneath her. It was an indignity she couldn't let go. She leaned toward Linda, her voice a harsh whisper. "This isn't over," Evelyn hissed, her eyes narrowing as she glared at Maya's back. "I'm going to make sure she regrets this." Linda's face turned pale. "Evelyn, please, just let it go. The captain's already warned you. And that woman, she's not someone to mess with." "Don't be ridiculous," Evelyn snapped. "She's nobody. She just got lucky, that's all. And I'm not about to let some woman in a cheap blazer show me up." Linda cringed at the venom in Evelyn's tone but said nothing. She had seen this side of her friend before, a relentless need to win at all costs. But this time, Linda couldn't shake the feeling that Evelyn was in over her head, a ripple of awareness. Meanwhile, the other passengers were quietly dissecting the drama they had just witnessed. Whispers floated through the cabin, their voices low but audible enough to reach Maya's ears. "Who do you think she is?" a man in a navy suit muttered to his seatmate. She called someone at corporate like it was nothing. "Whoever she is," his companion replied. "She handled that beautifully." "Did you see her?" Didn't even flinch. Another passenger, a woman in her 60s with an air of curiosity, leaned toward the aisle. "It's about time someone stood up to people like that," she said, her voice just loud enough to carry. Maya didn't react to the murmurs. She had learned to let these moments wash over her, neither indulging in them nor letting them distract her. Her focus remained on the task ahead, closing the deal in Zurich that could transform her company's future. But as much as she tried to concentrate, a part of her couldn't help but reflect on what had just happened. This wasn't just about Evelyn's entitlement or the crew's hesitation. It was about something deeper, the unspoken biases that still lingered in spaces like these. Maya had fought her entire life to carve out a place for herself, and moments like this reminded her why she couldn't afford to stop fighting. "The captain returns." The intercom crackled to life once more. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We apologize for the delay and appreciate your patience. We'll be departing shortly. Please remain seated as we prepare for takeoff." The captain's voice was calm, but Maya detected a subtle edge of authority, a reminder that he was in control of the situation. She glanced out the window as the plane began to taxi, the lights of the runway casting long shadows across the tarmac. The delay had cost them nearly 30 minutes, but she knew the repercussions of what had happened would extend far beyond the duration of the flight. As the plane lifted off the ground, Evelyn shot another glare in Maya's direction, her resentment simmering just below the surface. Maya ignored her, flipping to a fresh page in her notebook and jotting down notes for her upcoming presentation. She refused to let Evelyn's petty behavior distract her from what truly mattered. The encounter. The flight had been uneventful for the next hour. The passengers settled into their routines, some watching movies, others napping or reading. Evelyn, however, couldn't let it rest. Her frustration had reached a boiling point, and she was determined to confront Maya one last time. She stood abruptly, her heels clicking against the aisle as she approached Maya's seat. Several passengers glanced up, their curiosity reignited. Maya sensed her presence before Evelyn spoke. She closed her notebook and looked up, her expression calm but unyielding. "Can I help you?" Evelyn crossed her arms, glaring down at her. "I hope you're proud of yourself," she said, her voice low but laced with venom. "You think you've won, don't you?" Maya tilted her head slightly, her gaze steady. "This isn't about winning," she replied evenly. "It's about what's right. You were wrong, and instead of acknowledging that, you chose to make it everyone else's problem." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "You don't know who you're dealing with." "Neither do you," Maya said, her tone as sharp as a blade. "But you'll find out soon enough." Before Evelyn could respond, a familiar voice cut through the tension. "Mrs. Stokes, The captain said, his tone firm as he approached from the front of the cabin. "Return to your seat immediately, or I'll have no choice but to remove you from the flight." Evelyn froze, her face flushing with humiliation. The murmurs among the passengers grew louder as they watched the exchange. Reluctantly, she turned and marched back to her seat, her anger radiating off her like heat. The power of resolve. As Evelyn sat down, Maya allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. She had faced many battles like this in her life, and each one had taught her something valuable. The power of resolve. It wasn't always about fighting back with words or actions. Sometimes it was about standing firm, refusing to be moved, and letting the weight of the truth speak for itself. She glanced out the window again, the inky darkness of the sky stretching out before her. This flight, like so many moments in her life, had been a reminder of the challenges she faced and the strength she had cultivated to overcome them. And as the plane soared through the night, Maya knew she wouldn't let anyone, not Evelyn, not anyone else, dim her light. The aftermath in the sky. The hum of the engines enveloped the cabin as the plane reached cruising altitude, but the tension lingered like an invisible storm cloud. Maya sat in her seat, her notebook open but untouched, her pen resting between her fingers. She'd resumed her calm exterior, but her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. She wasn't angry. Maya rarely let herself indulge in that emotion. Instead, she felt a deep, simmering disappointment. This wasn't the first time she'd been confronted with someone like Evelyn Stokes. It wasn't the first time she'd had to remind the world that her presence in spaces like this wasn't a privilege. It was earned. Still, the way Evelyn's audacity had unfolded left Maya reflecting on the deeper systems at play. It wasn't just about Evelyn's entitlement. It was about the silent complicity of others, the hesitation to stand up for what was right. Across the aisle, Evelyn sat stiffly, her expression frozen in a mask of fury. Her companion, Linda, shifted uncomfortably beside her, clearly wishing she could disappear. Evelyn's posture, however, was rigid with indignation, her mind churning with schemes to reclaim the control she felt she had lost. Evelyn leaned toward Linda, her voice a low hiss. "This isn't over," she muttered, her eyes fixed on Maya's back. "I don't care what it takes. She'll regret crossing me." Linda, to her credit, tried to inject some reason into the conversation. "Evelyn, please," she whispered, her voice pleading. "Just let it go. This isn't worth it. You've already made a scene, and the captain himself told you to stop." Evelyn shot her a withering glare. "You don't understand," she snapped. "People like her think they can just walk into our spaces and take what isn't theirs. Someone has to put them back in their place." Linda shrank back, too timid to push further. Evelyn's words hung in the air like poison, unspoken but loud enough for the surrounding passengers to catch the undertones. More than a few shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their previous sympathy for Evelyn now replaced with quiet disdain. The captain's warning. As the cabin settled into an uneasy rhythm, the captain appeared once more, stepping out of the cockpit with a purposeful stride. He approached Evelyn's row and stopped, his presence commanding attention from everyone in the vicinity. "Mrs. Stokes," he said, his voice low but firm, "this will be the last time I address you about this matter. You've disrupted the flight once, and I will not tolerate further disturbances. If you cannot conduct yourself appropriately, I will have no choice but to divert this plane and have you removed." The threat of a diversion silenced even Evelyn, whose lips parted in shock. The murmurs among the passengers grew louder at the captain's words, a ripple of approval running through the cabin. It was one thing to argue over a seat, but to jeopardize everyone's journey. That was a step too far. "You can't be serious," Evelyn stammered, her voice faltering for the first time. "I'm a loyal customer of this airline. I've spent—" "This is not a negotiation," the captain interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. "You've been warned. Any further disruption will result in immediate action. Do I make myself clear?" Evelyn's face flushed with humiliation, but she managed a stiff nod. "Yes," she said through gritted teeth, barely able to contain her anger. The captain lingered for a moment, his sharp gaze ensuring his message had been received, before turning and walking back to the cockpit. The cabin fell into a hushed silence, save for the faint whispers of passengers speculating about what might happen next. Maya's quiet triumph. Maya had watched the exchange from her seat, her expression calm and inscrutable. She didn't take pleasure in Evelyn's humiliation. This wasn't about ego. But there was a quiet satisfaction in knowing that Evelyn's behavior had finally been checked, that she couldn't bully her way into getting what she wanted. She picked up her pen and began writing in her notebook, jotting down ideas for the presentation she would deliver in Zurich. Despite the distraction, her mind remained sharp, her focus unwavering. Maya had trained herself to compartmentalize, to push aside the noise and zero in on what truly mattered. It was one of the many skills that had brought her to where she was today. But as she wrote, a soft voice interrupted her thoughts. "Excuse me," the woman seated across the aisle said, leaning slightly toward Maya. She was older, with kind eyes and a warm smile. "I just wanted to say, I think you handled all of that beautifully. It's not easy standing your ground like that, especially in a situation like this." Maya glanced up, surprised by the comment. She gave the woman a polite smile. "Thank you," she said simply. The woman nodded. People like her. She tilted her head toward Evelyn's row. They're used to getting their way. It's good to see someone remind them that the world doesn't revolve around them. Maya appreciated the sentiment but didn't linger on it. "I just did what anyone would do," she said modestly. The woman chuckled. "Not anyone. Trust me, I've seen plenty of people back down in the face of that kind of entitlement. You've got a quiet strength about you. Don't let anyone take that away." Maya nodded, her smile widening slightly. "Thank you," she repeated. The woman's words, though simple, carried a weight that resonated with her. A ripple effect. The hours passed uneventfully after that, but the atmosphere in the cabin had shifted. Passengers who had previously ignored Maya now regarded her with quiet admiration. Several exchanged knowing glances, silently commending her for her composure. Even the flight attendants seemed more attentive to her needs, offering her drinks and snacks with a level of deference they hadn't shown before. Evelyn, meanwhile, stewed in her seat, her fury simmering just below the surface. She avoided eye contact with everyone, her earlier bravado now reduced to silent resentment. Linda, sensing the shift in public opinion, kept her head down, too embarrassed to be associated with Evelyn's behavior. As the flight continued, Maya's phone buzzed softly in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a message from Marcus, the corporate contact she had spoken to earlier. "Marcus, just spoke to the CEO. They're taking this seriously. Expect a follow-up email by the time you land. Rest assured, changes are coming." Maya smiled faintly and slipped the phone back into her pocket. Marcus was as efficient as ever. She knew this wasn't just about holding Evelyn accountable. It was about addressing the larger issues within the airline's culture. And Maya was determined to see it through. A quiet reflection. As the plane began its descent, the cabin lights dimmed slightly, and the passengers settled into the final moments of the flight. Maya gazed out the window, the twinkling lights of Zurich coming into view below. She felt a sense of calm wash over her, the weight of the earlier confrontation lifting. This trip wasn't just about business anymore. It was about making a statement, not just to Evelyn or the airline, but to anyone who doubted her place in the world. Maya had spent her life fighting for the respect she deserved, and she wasn't about to let anyone take it away from her. The plane landed smoothly, and as the passengers began gathering their belongings, Maya remained seated, allowing the others to disembark first. She wasn't in a rush. She had all the time in the world. As she stood to retrieve her bag from the overhead compartment, she caught a glimpse of Evelyn, who was glaring at her from a distance. Maya met her gaze briefly, then turned away, her expression calm and unbothered. Evelyn's opinion didn't matter. It never had. The echoes of power. The airport terminal was alive with its usual chaos. announcements echoing over intercoms, the shuffle of passengers eager to reach their destinations, and the rhythmic whir of luggage wheels on polished floors. But for Maya, the noise barely registered. She walked with the kind of quiet confidence that made people unconsciously step aside, her carry-on bag trailing smoothly behind her. Her thoughts, however, weren't entirely on the upcoming business deal in Zurich. They lingered on the events of the flight, not in anger, but in contemplation. The encounter with Evelyn wasn't an isolated incident. It was a reflection of the many ways privilege and prejudice manifested in subtle but damaging ways. Maya had seen it in boardrooms, at conferences, even at the local coffee shop. Today had been another chapter in that ongoing narrative. But this time, she had rewritten the ending. An unexpected encounter. As Maya approached the immigration checkpoint, a familiar voice called out from behind her. "Miss Daniels." She turned to see Lillian, the cabin supervisor, hurrying toward her. The polished confidence Lillian had displayed during the flight was now replaced with visible unease. Her steps were hesitant, her eyes searching Maya's face for some sign of receptiveness. Maya stopped, her expression neutral. "Yes," she said, her tone measured but not unkind. Lillian exhaled, her hands clasped in front of her. I wanted to apologize for what happened on the flight. I should have handled it better." Maya regarded her for a moment, letting the silence hang between them. Finally, she spoke. "Why didn't you?" Lillian blinked, caught off guard by the directness of the question. She hesitated, then sighed. "I was trying to de-escalate the situation. But in hindsight, I realize I was asking the wrong person to compromise. You shouldn't have been put in that position." Maya's gaze softened slightly. "De-escalation is important," she said, her voice calm but firm. "But so is recognizing when someone is in the wrong. Your hesitation sent a message, not just to me, but to everyone watching. Do you understand that?" Lillian nodded slowly, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "I do. And I want you to know that I've already submitted a report to my manager about what happened. It won't just end here." Maya studied her for a moment longer, then gave a small nod. "Good. I hope you follow through." Relief flickered across Lillian's face. "Thank you," she said earnestly. "And again, I'm sorry." Maya didn't respond immediately, but as Lillian turned to leave, she added, "Next time, don't hesitate. Do the right thing, even if it's uncomfortable." Lillian paused, nodded once more, and walked away, her shoulders slightly straighter than before. The ripple of influence. As Maya continued through the terminal, she noticed a young woman standing near the arrivals board, her face lighting up when she saw Maya. She approached cautiously, clutching a tablet to her chest. "Excuse me," the woman said, her voice tentative. "I just wanted to say, I was on the flight with you. I saw what happened." Maya raised an eyebrow, but her expression remained open. "Did you?" The woman nodded quickly, her cheeks flushing with a mix of nervousness and admiration. "It was inspiring, the way you handled yourself. I've been in situations like that before, where people assumed I didn't belong, but I've never known how to respond. Seeing you stand your ground, it meant a lot." Maya's lips curved into a faint smile. "What's your name?" "Amara," the woman said, her voice growing steadier. "I work in marketing. I'm flying to Zurich for a conference." Maya extended her hand. "Nice to meet you, Amara. And thank you for saying that." Amara shook her hand, her confidence bolstered by the interaction. "Do you have any advice?" she asked, her tone almost shy. "For someone like me, trying to navigate spaces where it feels like I have to prove myself twice as much." Maya considered the question, then said, "Know your worth. The world will try to convince you that you're asking for too much or that you don't belong. Don't believe it. You're here for a reason. Own it." Amara's eyes shone with gratitude. "Thank you. I won't forget that." Maya gave her a nod and watched as she disappeared into the crowd. It wasn't the first time someone had approached her like this, and she doubted it would be the last. Every encounter like this reminded her why she did what she did, why she fought so hard to claim her space and pave the way for others to do the same. Corporate intervention. As Maya approached the baggage claim area, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a notification for an incoming call from Marcus. "Marcus," she said, answering quickly. "Maya," Marcus replied, his tone brisk but tinged with admiration. "Just got off the phone with the CEO. Let's just say Evelyn Stokes won't be flying with this airline for a while." Maya allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. "Good. But what about the crew?" "Lillian submitted a report, and the CEO is reviewing it personally," Marcus said. "They're taking this seriously, Maya. Your name carries a lot of weight, and they know this could have been a PR disaster if it went public. It shouldn't take someone like me to make them care," Maya said, her tone sharper now. "This isn't just about me, Marcus. How many other people have been treated the same way and didn't have the resources to fight back?" "I know," Marcus said, his voice softening. "And I told them as much. They're planning to implement new diversity and bias training for all employees. It's not perfect, but it's a start." Maya nodded to herself, satisfied for now. "Thank you, Marcus. Keep me updated." "Will do." "And Maya." "Yes." "You handled this brilliantly. I don't know how you stayed so calm." Maya chuckled softly. Years of practice. A new chapter. By the time Maya reached her hotel in Zurich, the events of the flight felt like a distant memory. The city lights glittered outside her window, casting a soft glow over the sleek, modern room. She sat by the window, a cup of herbal tea in her hand, and allowed herself a moment of reflection. Her notebook lay open on the desk, its pages filled with ideas and strategies. Tomorrow's meeting would be critical, a chance to secure the deal that could propel her company to new heights. But tonight, she let herself focus on the bigger picture. The flight had been more than just a confrontation. It had been a reminder of the importance of resilience, of standing firm in the face of adversity. It had shown her that even in moments of conflict, there was an opportunity to make a difference, to challenge the status quo and inspire others to do the same. Maya took a sip of her tea and smiled to herself. The world wasn't perfect, and there were battles still to be fought. But she was ready for them, one victory at a time. A legacy in motion. The conference room in Zurich was a stark contrast to the turbulence of the flight. Sleek glass walls reflected the morning sun, casting geometric patterns on the polished marble floor. Maya sat at the head of the long table, her notebook open in front of her, surrounded by executives from the international conglomerate she had come to meet. They leaned forward, their interest palpable, as she presented her vision for a partnership that could redefine the tech industry. Maya's voice was calm, steady, and precise as she walked them through her pitch. Years of navigating challenging spaces had taught her to command a room with quiet authority. She spoke not just of profits and innovations, but of purpose, the kind of impact her technology could have on communities worldwide. By the time she finished, there was no doubt in anyone's mind that she belonged at the helm of this discussion. As the meeting adjourned, one of the executives, a silver-haired man with an air of quiet wisdom, approached her. "Miss Daniels," he said, extending a hand, "your presentation was impressive. But more than that, your leadership is inspiring. I've heard about what happened on your flight here." Maya blinked, surprised but not unprepared. She shook his hand, her grip firm. "I didn't realize news traveled so fast," she said with a faint smile. The man chuckled. "When someone demonstrates the kind of grace and resolve you did, people notice. It's a rare quality in any industry. I admire your ability to stand your ground without losing your composure." Maya inclined her head. "Thank you. But for me, it wasn't just about standing my ground. It was about setting a precedent. I want people to know that they don't have to accept disrespect, no matter where they are or who they're dealing with." The man's expression softened, and he nodded. "That's a powerful message. I believe you're the kind of leader we need in this partnership." The deal was signed later that afternoon, marking a monumental step forward for Maya's company. But for her, the true victory wasn't just in the contract. It was in the affirmation that she could navigate challenges, both professional and personal, without compromising her values. Returning home. A week later, Maya boarded her return flight to the United States. This time, the experience was markedly different. The airline staff greeted her with a level of warmth and professionalism that bordered on reverence. It was clear that corporate had sent a memo, and her presence on the passenger manifest had ensured she would face no further complications. As she settled into her first-class seat, she noticed a handwritten note tucked into the seat pocket. It was on the airline stationery, the logo embossed in gold at the top. Maya unfolded it and read the message. "Dear Miss Daniels, on behalf of our entire team, we would like to extend our sincerest apologies for the incident on your previous flight. Your feedback has been invaluable in helping us address internal issues, and we are committed to making meaningful changes. Thank you for your understanding and for reminding us of the importance of treating every passenger with dignity and respect. Warm regards, David Harmon, CEO, Global Airways." Maya folded the note carefully and placed it back in the pocket. It was a small gesture, but it signified something much larger, a ripple of accountability that she had set in motion. A chance meeting. Midway through the flight, as the cabin lights dimmed for the evening service, a voice interrupted Maya's thoughts. Miss Daniels. She looked up to see a familiar face. Amara, the young woman she had met in Zurich, stood in the aisle, her expression tentative but hopeful. Maya smiled. "Amara, isn't it? What a coincidence." Amara nodded, clutching a coffee cup in one hand and her laptop bag in the other. "I saw you on the passenger list and hoped I might run into you again. Do you mind if I sit for a moment?" "Not at all," Maya said, gesturing to the empty seat beside her. Amara slid into the seat, her excitement barely contained. "I just wanted to thank you again. After we talked at the airport, I went into my presentation with a new mindset. I reminded myself that I belonged in that room, and it worked. My team loved my pitch, and now they're talking about giving me a lead role in our next big campaign." Maya's smile widened. "That's wonderful news, Amara. I'm glad you trusted yourself." "It's because of you," Amara said earnestly. "You showed me what it looks like to hold your ground with confidence and grace. I hope I can be that kind of role model someday." "You already are," Maya replied. "Every time you show up and own your space, you're paving the way for someone else to do the same." Amara beamed, and they spent the next few minutes chatting before she returned to her seat. As Maya watched her go, she felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. It wasn't just about the battles she fought. It was about the people she inspired along the way. A legacy solidified. Back home, Maya returned to the rhythm of her busy life, but the events of the past week stayed with her. She began receiving messages from colleagues, acquaintances, and even strangers who had heard about her encounter with Evelyn Stokes. Some reached out to commend her courage, while others shared their own stories of facing similar challenges. Maya decided to channel that momentum into action. She hosted a series of workshops at her company, focusing on diversity, inclusion, and the importance of standing up to bias in all its forms. The workshops were attended not just by her employees, but by leaders from other industries who admired her approach. Months later, as she stood on stage at a leadership summit, Maya reflected on how a single flight had sparked a conversation that was now rippling across boardrooms and communities. She spoke of the importance of challenging the status quo, of holding people accountable, and of using one's voice to create change. The audience hung on her every word, inspired by her story and her resolve. When she finished, the room erupted in applause, a testament to the impact she had made. The power of one voice. Years later, Maya would look back on that fateful flight as a turning point, not because of the confrontation itself, but because of what followed. She had turned a moment of prejudice into an opportunity for progress, proving that even the smallest actions could lead to meaningful change. As she continued to build her company and mentor the next generation of leaders, Maya remained steadfast in her belief that resilience and integrity were the keys to true success. And every time she boarded a flight, she carried with her the quiet strength that had defined her journey, a reminder that she belonged, not just in the skies, but anywhere she chose to be.